Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on best practices for high quality discussant and chair process. On behalf of ASHE, the Association for the Study of Higher Education, it's my pleasure to welcome y'all today. My name is Alicia Castillo-Shrestha. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director for Conference and Events for ASHE. I'll be your support person throughout the webinar. If y'all have any access needs in terms of accessibility or logistical support, you can feel free to email alicia@ashe.ws. You can also use the chat feature in the webinar, and feel free to reach out if any of the technology is not working, and we'll do our best to get that squared away as soon as we can. We are recording today's session, and we will have it available to everyone who registered and also post to the ASHE YouTube channel as well. So to get us started, I just want to say thank you so much to our wonderful volunteer leaders, our co-chairs for the program committee this year, Doctors Vasquez and Lane. They will introduce themselves here in a second, as well as our wonderful volunteer panelists. We do want to first do a land acknowledgement and for our conference location, which is in Denver, located on the traditional territory and homelands of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. 48 tribal nations are also connected to and continue to be in relation with the lands that are now known as Colorado, which we'll be convening on next month. Denver was a site for the Indian Relocation Act of 1956, which sought to relocate Indigenous peoples from reservations to urban areas as part of the federal government's broader termination policy era. We're very thankful to our local and community engagement committee for pulling together a lot of materials, educational and experiences for us to be more connected to the space and place and learn about the traditional territories and homelands of the Indigenous peoples. We will have questions and answers available, so please feel free to send those in throughout the webinar. As part of today's discussion, we've agreed to abide by the Code of Conduct, so feel free to research that website if you haven't looked into it. We really are committed to providing a safe and productive, welcoming environment for everyone. I will turn it over to our wonderful co-chairs of the program committee. ASHE is so thankful for their service this year to give us an overview of the agenda.
Hi, everyone. I am Tonisha Lane. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an associate professor of higher education at Virginia Tech, and I'm so excited to be here today among you all, as well as co-leading this with some special people. You heard from Alicia and also Dr. Marissa Vasquez, so I'll allow her to introduce herself.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Marissa Vasquez. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm joining virtually from San Diego, which occupies the ancestral homelands of the Kumeyaay peoples. And again, just want to reiterate the gratitude to our panelists and to, all of our volunteers throughout this entire process, and to Alicia and Jason also for holding it down in the ASHE office for all of us to be here. So thank you. Do you want me to, so I guess I'll just go. Oh,
Oh, I was gonna go.
you go.
Sorry.
My bad.
Um, I also wanted to acknowledge the homelands of the Tutelo and Amatacan people that are inhabitants of that land that Virginia Tech is situated on today, presently, in the past, and in generations to come. We also do a labor acknowledgement at Virginia Tech, acknowledging the labor of enslaved Black people who contributed to the resources and what we see as Virginia Tech today. I'm going to, should we go ahead and present the panelists first since they're on this slide, Alicia? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and allow our panelists to also introduce themselves, starting with Dr. Lisa Lattuca.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Lattuca. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a professor in the Center for the Study of Higher and Post-Secondary Education at the University of Michigan and the current director. University of Michigan sits on the homelands of the Three Rivers people, excuse me. And the treaty actually that was set in Detroit promised education to the sons and daughters of Indigenous people, but that treaty was never followed, and we are still arguing about the sovereignty rights of the people who have inhabited this land much before we did.
Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Leudke. I'm an associate professor in educational policy studies and coordinator of our urban higher education program, as well as co-director of the Center for Urban Education Leadership, all at the University of Illinois, Chicago. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I'm excited to be here with you all and share some of my insight into my prior experiences and recommendations in serving as a discussant at our wonderful conference. Pass it over.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jin Jang-Tucci. I'm a PhD candidate in educational policy studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Today, I'll be sharing my experiences as a graduate student navigating chair roles at ASHE. I think ASHE was one of my first conferences that I served as a chair, and it has been a wonderful experience. So I would love to share my experiences and knowledge about this subject. Nice to meet you all.
I apologize. Let's try that again. Good afternoon. My name is Dorian McCoy. I use he series pronouns. I'm an associate professor at the University of South Carolina, which is the original home of the Catawba people. However, I am currently in Arkansas, which is home, the original land of the Caddo, Osage, Washita, and Tunica tribes.
Okay, thank you, panelists, and thank you again for being here today. So just to give an overview of our agenda for today, we will begin with talking about some of the ways that discussants and chairs prepare for their roles at the conference. So before the session, day of the session, and after the session. And from there, we'll have some Q&A with our panelists who have had an opportunity to introduce themselves. Some have served as discussants, others have served as chairs, and some have served as both. From there, we'll have an opportunity for any logistical reminders that Alicia will bring to our attention, and some time, if time permits, for Q&A and wrap up. So again, thank you for everyone that's here today, and thank you for our panelists. Next slide. Okay, so to begin, when it comes to chairing and operating as discussants, there are multiple roles. So initially, regarding the timeline of support, you would begin with, before the session, the chair reaching out to the group via email and informing them about the session, kind of what to expect for that session, as well as encouraging them to submit their papers if they haven't done so already. Those papers will be submitted to discussants, who reviews the papers and prepares remarks for the conference by October, the deadline that is set in October. And then the discussant provides reading feedback either before or after the conferences. The presenters will submit PowerPoint slides, and there's a deadline for that. And the chair sends reminders again to the group as needed to solidify those timelines of session with all the participants.
Okay. I think what might also be helpful is, and I don't remember if there were presenters who were joining us today, or maybe new presenters that are kind of maybe joining us to get a sense of like what to expect from discussants and chairs. But it might be helpful too in those early kind of outreach via emails to just remind maybe new presenters or presenters in general about the feedback and just I think that's been that the feedback will be public, that they'll be receiving public feedback, just as a reminder or as like new information for any folks who might be new and joining ASHE. I think that's been something that we have been kind of actively trying to just remind our community about. So big picture, right? Day of session, trying to arrive early for the session, it would be really helpful just to kind of get a sense of the room and making sure that technology is working. If, as the chair, your role is to, kind of just facilitate just welcomes, right? Like welcome attendees, the presenters, facilitating the introductions, doing a walk through the agenda. Then the chair will introduce the session, will provide a land acknowledgement, and all of this will be provided to you. So like the land acknowledgement from ASHE, or it's on the website too. I mean, I think in the program, and I think after that, introducing the first presenter. And during that time, as the presenters are presenting, I think another important role of the chair is keeping track of time, right? Monitoring the time. And Dorian has a fun way of, I'm going to ask that you share later how you do this with the audience. Because I think sometimes that can be kind of like, one of those like awkward things where it's like, how do I interrupt someone when they're speaking? Or like, just reminding them like, you got to wrap it up. And so, during the session, obviously we have the presentations, and then afterwards is when the discussant will come to the podium and, share their remarks. There are times that discussants will have prepared PowerPoint presentations, and some might not. I think it's kind of to the discussant themselves. And then after that, it'll follow up with discussion with the attendees, and then for the chair, just kind of wrapping up or closing the session. Or this, depending on time too, it could be helpful just to maybe have a plan ahead with the discussant, right? If you're running out of time, maybe it's the discussant that kind of wraps up the session and just thanks, folks for being there. But normally it's the role of the chair to do that. And then I'll pass it back to Tonisha for after the session.
We did have a question that came through. I wanted to jump in really quick. The question about the exception for the works in progress. It's a great question because this is just a sample. We have all different types of presentations at ASHE. And so, for example, with works in progress, there's no discussant because the papers and the PVDS sessions are in progress. They're not final. And so typically that format will be slightly different. The chair can start. And then each paper that's presented in works in progress would have discussion on that specific presentation, and then move to the next, have discussion on that specific one. Because it's a works in progress, you want to get all that feedback from the audience members and the chair before going to an open discussion at the end. So that outline is in the presenter guide. There's a section for chairs, but that's a great question. And the format would look very similar for sessions that have PVDS sessions or presentations, which are performance, visual, digital scholarship, which may look a little bit different, but for the most part, it would follow the same format as a paper session. Great question. Keep them coming.
Alicia,
Yes,
there was another question in the chat about the land acknowledgement.
Yes, so the land acknowledgement is available in the presenter guide. It's open to everyone. I'll put that link in the chat. But yes, the chairs can use the prepared slide deck. And that's especially helpful if your presenters don't plan to use slides. You can still have that slide deck open because it has captions enabled in it. So it would be great for your session to have those captions on, which we encourage all presenters, all presentations to have. And you'll have that land acknowledgement there as well. So yes, anything that's in the presenter guide includes discussants and chairs as presenters at the conference. Great questions.
There was one more question. There may be some feedback for this. What if you are scheduled the session right before the session you are chairing? This would inhibit me as a presenter to arrive early. Any recommendations about that?
I guess I would communicate that to the presenters, right? Like let me see, if you're chairing the session, then maybe in the email, right, in the preparation email, that's something that you will notify your discussant and the presenters, just so that they have a heads up about timing, and maybe suggest that the discussant or the presenters kind of are set up and until you get there.
Yes, I think communication's key, and folks are, giving everyone grace. Thankfully, we try to make everything in a great location, but so it shouldn't be too much. We have extended the time between sessions to 20 minutes. It used to be 15, so that should help as well. But yes, just communicate and let us know if you need help with that.
Okay, and then following the session, the discussant will provide feedback, written feedback to the authors if not already provided. And so this is a great opportunity for authors to continue to refine their papers and move them forward towards publication. And I bring that up because some people, based on their training or mentoring, was not aware that the goal of writing the conference paper is to eventually submit it to a journal that would be a good fit for your paper and your topic and your ideas, so that it could eventually be published and, if accepted, be published, and so that knowledge can be disseminated beyond the conference. So again, it is so valuable for discussants to provide that oral feedback that happens during the session, but also that written feedback so that authors can hopefully continue to move their work forward. And just again to note that there is support during, before, and after sessions. And so you can receive that support from the ASHE staff virtually or in person. We also have an BUDS person that will be in person on site. And so that person is also helpful, or people are helpful if if anything emerged during the session that you think should be presented to that individual or individuals. So now we can transition into our panel discussion to get more in depth about, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alicia. This is another slide, I think, for you.
Nope, sorry, I just wanted to be able to spotlight the speakers, so we should be good for the panel.
Okay. Alrighty then, so now we're going to transition into our panel discussion so we can have a bit more of an in-depth conversation about some of the ways that they engage as discussants and chairs, and to the extent that this will be helpful for you that are here that will be serving in those roles, or even if you're a presenter and you're trying to understand more of that context. So our first question goes to Lisa. So when you think about the most helpful or generative experience you've had with a discussant during a session, what did that involve?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think the discussion made clear to me that they really understood the goals and the purpose of the paper. Like the purpose was not simply to provide feedback on every piece of the manuscript and point out what was great or what was, needed work, but that they understood what we were trying to do or what I was trying to do with the study and thought about it in that way so that they could sort of frame their feedback around how do you best achieve that purpose, right? So based on the method that you're using, based on the framework that you want to use, based on the contribution that you want, like how do you frame the feedback so that you can give it to folks in a really constructive way, but in a way that helps them see that you understand what they are trying to do. Because I think sometimes we read papers and we don't always think, like we think about what we think about them as opposed to thinking about like what is the goal of the person or the team that's writing this and how do I help them best achieve that. So I think they made it clear to me that that was the first thing that they were there for, was to help me achieve the goal that I wanted to get to. And the ways that they talked about the feedback, like made it clear that it was all about strengthening it to make that possible.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because, again, if you're moving these papers towards a journal or some other kind of dissemination format, you want to ensure that your ideas are clear and that people are understanding and that you're conveying what you expect to convey. And so I think that definitely can be helpful feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know we have some time, so I wanted to see if, before I ask the next question, if there's another person that wants to answer that question. I'll have Courtney answer it along with her next question. Okay. All right. So, okay. So I'm going to ask the next question, and answering this question, I guess, Courtney, in your capacity as having been a discussant or even as a presenter, right? Or as a chair, what were features of maybe, conversely, a less helpful experience with a discussant, or, thinking about the previous question, in what ways do you frame your involvement engagement as a discussant, so that folks do have an opportunity to get the feedback that would be supportive and enriching for their paper?
Yeah, I think a couple of your final keywords, supportive, enriching, should really be like the focus of the feedback that's provided, especially publicly. If there is more constructive or critical feedback, that should be shared privately with the authors, like in that written feedback that's shared. I think that the space that we use in the session should really, really be to like uplift the work that's being presented, to pose questions, for folks to like think more deeply about. But I have been in a session where discussing kind of like tore apart a presenter, like somebody who was a graduate student, and that's something that I never want to experience again. Like, I don't think there's a space for that to, that should ever be a space for that to happen. So I think as we think about like serving in a discussant role and preparing feedback, everybody, has a different approach to providing feedback. My approach is I typically do like to print out the manuscript because I am 40 years old. So I like to have the hard copies of things to read through. And so
Wow.
I'll like write things in the margins or like pose a question. And then maybe on the back of the paper, I'll type up one page of like, these are like the big things that I really think you should focus on. And there might be like smaller things kind of written in the margins that I will share like privately. But when I prepare my remarks for publicly, it's again, like, these are the things that I think are really strong about the manuscript. These are some questions I want the authors to think about, but not in a way that's going to like tear anybody down. I also think it can be a good idea in terms of thinking about the first question. I really appreciate how, Tonisha, you shared in the beginning of the whole purpose of this process of like submitting work to the conference. You get feedback on your proposal. If you're accepted, you're going to present it, get feedback from the discussant. The next step is for you to incorporate that feedback, see what else the audience shares for you, and use that to revise your manuscript and to submit it to a journal under review. I've like almost never published anything that I didn't previously present at a conference. I think it's a great way, if it's not already a part of your process, to think about this as like, this is what I do to kind of force myself to build in deadlines for publication. So it's through that submission to the proposal. When it's accepted, then it's getting that feedback from the discussion and the folks in the session and using that to revise your paper and like get it out under review somewhere. So sometimes I'll also suggest potential journals that I think they could consider. Sometimes what I do too is when I get, somebody sends me their paper, I'll be like, are there specific areas of feedback that you want me to pay more attention to than others? I also think something that wasn't clear sometimes for grad students submitting is that typically it's a journal length manuscript for around a 30-page paper, because I once had somebody send me something that was like 70 or 80 pages. And I had to be like, unfortunately, I'm not going to have the capacity to read the whole 80 pages. So what can I focus on? But even if it's getting that traditional length manuscript, again, in wanting to provide the most helpful feedback, asking the authors of, or letting your discussant know when you send the paper, like, this is an area I'm really kind of struggling with. I'd really appreciate any feedback you have in this area. I'm going to pause now because I feel like I've already shared a lot, but those are some of the key things I think about in terms of what I've done as a discussant and like the kind of feedback that's most helpful for me as an author on a paper that I'm submitting.
I
Can
can.
I-
Courtney's comment made me think about something that I think is super important for discussants to remember, which is to leave enough time to do the work well. It's like reviewing a journal manuscript. And we care a lot about how we do those, right? That's an important scholarly contribution that we make. It's part of our work. Um, and I think if we underestimate the amount of time it takes to write really good feedback, we won't be able to do that work. So I think, it's not like you're reading this stuff on the plane as you're going to Denver. Like, just schedule it so that you feel that you can spend enough time with each piece to really see what the promise is and to frame it constructively. And that just takes time. So I think the discussant role is a really important role. And if we take it seriously, then part of it is just finding the time because if we said yes, we should do it well.
Yeah, I like to jump in. I'm gonna.
Dorian, if I could
Okay,
just
if we're good.
jump in really quickly, but just a quick caveat to what Lisa just shared, it also requires presenters to submit their papers on time.
Yes.
So I think that sometimes when, not all the times, but sometimes when discussants have not possibly done their due diligence or have not done that thorough review, it is potentially that they're dealing with the time constraints of when they receive the paper. So I appreciate Lisa bringing up that point, because I think it's another opportunity to just remind folks of why it's important to submit everything for the deadlines. So go ahead, Dorian. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think ASHE has evolved since my first one. I'm not going to say when, since Courtney thinks 40 is now old. But I was in this session with Courtney, and that's why I was laughing. I wasn't laughing at what she was saying. I was in that session. So for discussants, remember, particularly for our scholars who are at the beginning of their careers, this is an opportunity to build them up publicly. Now, if it's not a great paper, you know how to say that without tearing them down. Okay. And publicly, I'm not going to say anything negative anyway. I'm going to find what's positive in the paper, but in my written feedback, I'm going to say this needs a little bit more development. We all know how to do that. Okay. And so it's really critical that we don't harm our new scholars, whether they're on the tenure track or they're grad students, because the session Courtney and I was in, it was a grad student. And another colleague, Courtney and myself, we spent some time with that student, letting them know this was not about you, something's going on. Because we knew the discussant personally, who later apologized, but the damage was done for the student.
Yeah, I agree. And I know we were going to transition, but before we do, I wanted to ask how you all approach as we mentioned, right? There's for whatever reason, like if we're writing a paper and maybe there's some times that some folks will delay submitting a paper because there's this like pressure to have like a perfect complete paper, right? That is submitted. And so I guess I'm just wondering as discussants, right? Like how do you approach or what would you recommend to scholars, who are just like, okay, I've got a really good draft of a paper, but this area is, I know that it's still in development. Like, is that okay for me to submit, right? And how do you deliver that feedback?
I think part of what I shared is I think it's really helpful to, as you're, whether you upload it to the system and then send an email directly to the discussant or attach it in the email to the discussant directly saying, hey, I really was hoping to do X, Y, Z in the paper, and unfortunately didn't get to it. So if you could pay special attention to the theoretical framework or the conceptual framework, I'm still kind of navigating how I'm working that into my findings. Just be clear about like, this is where I would like extra help on. I also think, reaching out, I've had people reach out to me and be like, can I get an extension? I'm not recommending like that everybody do that, but I think if there's times, but I think it's respectful to like reach out and ask for an extension. Like if the discussions is okay to get it a week after the initial deadline, but still a few weeks ahead of the conference, they may or may not have that flexibility, but it's better to communicate and make that request as opposed to not uploading or submitting anything. Because I've also been in the position of I never got a paper and like never like at all until the person was up there presenting. And then that was really hard for me as a discussant to try to like prepare a little bit of feedback. So it wasn't like super awkward that everybody knew that the person didn't submit a paper to me. I didn't want to give that look. So, but I was having to try to create a few things like live in the session. So I think it's better to reach out ahead of time, give the draft and say like, please help me with this area in particular, as opposed to not submitting anything because you're worried about it. Like it'd be better to get some feedback than no feedback. Because again, the goal is for you to continue developing the manuscript and submit it for publication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is for Dorian. So as a previous volunteer serving in the chair role and also from your lens as a paper author and session attendee, how do you view the role of the chair in the session? And what do you have for someone new to serving in this capacity?
Yeah, it's great question. Great question. First of all, for a chair, more times than not, grad student, new scholar, lean into it. I know I was a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Bug-eyed, because the first or second time that I was a chair, I was like, I'm reading this paper, I'm reading this scholar's work in class, or this is so and so and so. And then they're like, just chill, just do your job, okay? So, go in, think of them as colleagues. You're really controlling the session. So it's a great opportunity for you, as I would like to say, have a little fun, okay? Introduce the session, introduce the presenters. Don't forget to introduce yourself. Don't be afraid to restate what needs to be done. If you got 3 papers and we got 75 minutes, hey, you got 12 minutes for each paper. Discussant's got 12 minutes. We're going to leave about 15 for Q&A because the Q&A is often the richest part of it, okay? Because there's a generation of ideas for people's papers, and you'll see all the presenters feverishly taking notes, whether they're old school like Courtney and using a pen and paper, or they're using their iPad, okay? So that would be the first. Now, Marissa mentioned that I have a neat way of keeping time, and time is critical, okay? So I'm going old school. My first ASHE, 2004, 2005. I think I had a white sheet of paper with the 5 minute, 3 minute, 1 minute stop. And it's like people didn't see it. So I said, okay, I got you. Next year, I put it on bright orange paper, black letters, bigger font, laminated it. I still have that because you can sit there and do 5, 3, 1, and they won't see you. But if you're holding up a sheet of paper that's bright orange with black letters in 36-point font, everybody sees that. And it also keeps you from having to do the odd thing of like, hey, I need you to stop, okay? Because they're clued in. So I like to tell them in advance, I've got these cards. I know it's old school, but you can't miss it. And it keeps me from having to stop a quality presentation because we want to be equitable. We want each scholar or each scholar team to have an equal amount of time to present their scholarship.
Yeah, thank you. And I was also gonna say is like I think it could be like having those multiple reminders, right? So as the chair, right, when you're sending that initial email out, it could be helpful just to initially put it there. Hey, during the session, this is how I'm gonna monitor time. This is cool. When you show up at the session, when you're there, if you have a chance to, or just say, hey, just a reminder, I'm gonna be using these flashcards or whatever way, right? Like if you're gonna see me in the back doing this, and that means yeah, parale, like okay, moving on. But I think just again communication, right? As Alicia said, like just communicate, to the team, like, hey, what are we doing? And just again reminding people like we want to be respectful of people's time. We've all been stressing out preparing our 12-minute presentation, which that's a lot of work and a lot of time. So yeah, I appreciate that, Dorian.
And Marissa, if I could add one more thing too, as the presenter, I think it's also important to make eye contact with the chair, knowing that they will be keeping time.
Absolutely.
So at some
Yes.
point, you do want to make eye contact so that they are aware that you see the time and that and vice versa. And then also sometimes even giving a head nod just to say, yeah, I acknowledge that, I'm at 10 minutes or I'm at 5 minutes or whatever the case may be. So I think that's also important to just keep that communication going through those nonverbals as well.
Absolutely. I try to sit front row at the end, the center. That way they can't miss me. Okay. So I am front and center, and I am the first person in the audience that the presenters see. So they can't miss the big orange flashcard.
I love it. Jin, the next question is for you, which is, what are things that you wish you knew about serving as chair, or, similarly, what advice would you give to folks who are serving as a chair for the first time?
It's a great question. And Dorian mentioned a lot of things that I want to piggyback on. I'm a little bit jumpy by default. So there are many things that startled me when I was preparing as a chair or serving as a chair at the sessions. Like, for example, a presenter has a flight delay, so they're going to arrive 30 minutes late. And the discussant doesn't show up. And I was really scared at first. As a graduate student, I was in the second year, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And then like Dorian just said that later in later years, I kind of realized, okay, this is about having a good conversation and sincere conversation. So just making sure that everyone is engaged is a core goal. And if a presenter cannot show up or a discussant cannot show up, just from there. And that's what I started to learn from other chairs that I attended. So another thing is printing out the time sign is really helpful. I tried this 3-2-1, but when there are many attendees, I think the presenters are also a little overwhelmed. So they tend to look at the attendees, not really the chair in front of them. So it's having a good idea to have a sign up. And I learned this later, but I found it really helpful to be in that room right before the session, if possible, or even way before, if available, and have to just fill out the room. And usually, a session at ASHE has been always interesting, even when it's not closely related to my research or subject area. So it was fun. And I also could see kind of technical difficulties that could arise. Some rooms have just continuous problems sometimes, even though staff fixes it and then it goes bad again sometimes. So kind of knowing what kind of issues can arise in that room was really helpful for me and to just warn the presenters. Like, so just so you know, there has been some stops and video projectors and so on. So if that happens, we might have to call someone, but be aware. And another thing that I was thinking that is that there are different vibes in the sessions, I think. So I have been a chair in a very crowded session once, and then I was a chair with a very few attendees. And I was a little awkward and I didn't know what to do. So I did my very formal structure introduction with 3 attendees and 3 presenters and me at the same time, which made the conversation very weird. So later I learned that I could have done it a little more natural and make it more like a roundtable session and having a good conversation based on the presenter. But I learned that after making that kind of little mistakes, which was very well received and nicely dealt with. But having that kind of different context in mind was very helpful for me, I think.
Yeah, that is very helpful to think about the difference of the session and how many people are there, and that will determine sometimes how you operate as a chair. There's a question in the chat. How about when doing a virtual session? How do we best keep time? So I don't know if anyone on the panel has been in the virtual session, if you have any suggestions around that.
I haven't, but remind me, are the virtual sessions, like, do we use Zoom?
Yeah,
Because
they're
if
usually like this.
so, okay, because I was like, I don't know, like, I know that sometimes there's like an app, right, that you can pull up like a timer. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you could use the timer app, on Zoom. I would definitely set that up beforehand. Obviously, again, communicate presenters and just say, hey, we're going to be using it this time. If you wanted to do more formal, or if there's like a more informal way where it's like, hey, I'm going to send you a private message. But again, right, like I know sometimes when we're like locked into our presentations, we miss the little pop-ups. So yeah, I mean, those are just some thoughts that I have in mind, but I guess I'll defer to maybe Alicia if you've seen anyone using any other special ways to do that in the virtual sessions.
Yeah, I think this is another case of communication is key. So I think as checking in with the group beforehand to say, like maybe in your initial outreach or your follow-up to say, we're going to be virtual for our session. How do y'all prefer for me to help, manage the time? Some people might get anxious seeing the clock ticking down. Some people might have a partner that can monitor the chat while they're presenting and vice versa. Some people do present by themselves. And so that does make it a little bit challenging, but others are also welcome to invite you to verbally say, we've got 3 more minutes here, to try and find that in. And once they accept that that's going to happen, it's less awkward for you to be like, okay, I've got to like get my word in here, or visually too, because for Zoom you can have your camera on and you can have some visual opportunities as well. But I think communication is key. But happy to hear from others as well, what they've seen or done as a chair for virtual sessions.
Well, if anything else comes up, feel free to share your thoughts. But I did want to ask another question before we move on to one of our last questions, at least for this segment of our session, about when things may go awry in a session. So there are instances where the chair is in some ways responsible for initiating the Q&A period that may come from the audience. Dorian mentioned this earlier. And maybe someone is taking up too much time, or maybe, the discussant did a really nice job of not, quote unquote, tearing people down or tearing their paper down, but maybe someone in the session, wants to critique the methods that have been shown or the analysis and ways that could potentially be harmful or toxic. Again, I want to start with the chairs to see if you've experienced that and what that may look like in your role, but also those of you that are on our panel as previous discussants, if you could also maybe highlight some suggestions or how you would suggest managing something like that.
Jen, you want to go first or you want me to?
Oh, you could go first. I'll think about it more.
Yeah, great question. Number one, unfortunately, sometimes we have colleagues that will they're verbose. That's the word I'm looking for. And I've had to simply stand up and say, hey, that's great. This is a healthy dialogue. It's a good conversation, but we want to make sure we share this space and give others in attendance an opportunity to speak. Okay. Um, God, I like to think we are a better as scholars broadly than when I started out in student affairs. My first presentation with a senior scholar that I'm pretty sure most of the panelists know, I was the new student affairs professional brought on to this presentation. And someone in the audience asked a question, and I guess they thought, well, he's young, he's not going to know how to address this. And the senior scholar tapped me on the shoulder and said, I got this one, because the person was trying to make a point. And they simply said, that's a great question. If you'd like to talk afterwards, we can chat a little bit more and not hold space in front of everyone. Person didn't say another word. So sometimes you've just got to be a little witty with it. But I haven't seen anything like that happen in a session in a really long time. And so I think we're mindful. I think ASHE has done a good job positioning itself and setting expectations of discussants and chairs. And so I think that's very infrequent. I could be wrong, but I haven't seen it. So I do think people come in recognizing it's not a one scholar show and they can't hold airspace the full Q&A.
That's a
Yeah,
really
I
great.
think that's a
Oh,
great point. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say I think that's a great point, and just the way you could kind of spin it, as well as I think it's also helpful when chairs will say, getting near the end that we only have one or two time, enough time, excuse me, for one or two questions, and so
Absolutely.
sometimes that will also signal to people that this is not an opportunity to belabor the point or go into a lot of dialogue. Go ahead, Jen. You were gonna say something.
It's just very similar note. I haven't experienced any discussant attacking presenters or anything similar to that, but I have attendees asking questions, very pointed, and even after answering one question, there were like follow-ups to just kind of chasing down to get to a point. So what I did there was like turning that question into more broader audience, like what you did and what you just shared. So that's an interesting question. I think in terms of this presentation, we could think about this aspect, and I want to give more other attendees to talk about this. So, and we all know that we want to give equal chance to all the attendees to ask questions and have discussions. So I think that kind of
Yeah, I agree with you and Dorian that I think over time things have improved a lot, and that, scholars are mindful, and also credit to the work of the ASHE staff as well as the board of ASHE that has really worked on policies and practices to improve in those ways. But I just want anyone that may be new to this process to be aware that if those things were to emerge, these are some strategies you could use. So thank you again, Jen and Dorian. And as we're getting later on time, I just want to ask this last question to Lisa. So how do you think your approach to serving as a discussant has changed over time, if at all?
Yeah. This may be a really good sort of segue from the last question,
Mm-hmm.
because I think what I realized over time is that, and this is the way I think about feedback in general to people, right? I feel like scholarship, right, is a conversation. And
Mhm.
if you treat it like a collegial conversation, then you engage people in thinking with you instead of sort of thinking at them. So I think I've just sort of started to write my feedback in a constructive way where I'm saying, this is how I'm thinking about what you're saying. Um, this is why I have this kind of feedback. This is where my question comes from, and really sort of positioning myself, like where does the question come from, and how am I thinking about it? And if you're thinking about it that way, right, then we can continue the conversation. If you're not, then it's an opportunity for more conversation, right? So I've tried to really just think about it as like I'm sitting across from you and we're having coffee and I like you and I would like to provide like really constructive feedback. So even just the way I write it is different. I still think I'm being I'm trying to be really systematic as I'm thinking about that. Like, here's all the things that I want to say, but I'm really trying to frame them in a way where it feels like this is just we're sitting and we're having a conversation, and I'm asking you questions that you may have answers to, and I just haven't seen them yet, right? So that's
Yep.
more like my approach now than it was in the past, where it felt like it was much more sort of here's the things. Now it's like, oh, here's how I'm thinking about the things.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to think about it in that manner, especially for our discussants that are in the room today. That you could really write up some of your feedback as this conversation, right? And using some of those prompts that you just shared. So I think that's a wonderful way to think about it. So again, thank you, panelists, for answering our questions. I do want to turn it over to Alicia to look at some of the logistical reminders. And again, if we have any remaining time, then possibly we can ask a few more questions. But I wanted to turn it over to her so that we are all aware of some of the things we need to know logistically.
Great. Thank y'all so much. It was a really, really rich discussion, and I know so many people are going to really benefit from all of these great nuggets that have come up. As I'm getting these slides shared again, just wanted to point out I put in the chat a direct link to the conference portal. And there's a couple places where folks will be uploading documents. And so I know we've already had some questions about the fact that there's two different places for presenters to upload things. So in terms of discussants and chairs, we're going to be looking at the conference portal. But presentations that if you happen to be a presenter or if you get questions from your presenters that for the sessions you're chairing, the upload for the PowerPoint slides is in outside of the conference portal. It's not in there. It's in a jot form. It's a separate link, which is in the presenter guide. But if you get questions from your presenters, just wanted to point that out. And let me share so y'all can see how you're going to access information as discussants and chairs. So can y'all see the login portal page? Okay, so this is just a screen grab. Apologize for the long URL. but there it's there, and it's in the presentation, and also in the website as well, the direct links to this. So this is a landing page. It may look familiar. You're going to log in as a discussant or chair into your account. And then there's a submitter menu that has a chair and discussant section. So you should have this. If you're trying to log in and you don't see these options, you can reach out to us at the conference at ashe.ws email, and we'll get y'all sorted. There's a participations tab, and this sometimes trips people up because there's two tabs here. So there's one for submissions and there's one for participations. So you want to make sure you're on the participations tab when you go into the system, to be looking for papers that have been submitted and emails for chairs as well for your group. So you can see, like this happens to be something that this person submitted and was accepted, and this is where they are serving in their role. So you can click on the links here. So when you're going to download the papers to review them, or if as a chair you need to access the emails, this is the screen that you're going to see. So you'll be able to see, I've blocked them out, but there's emails here for the folks that are part of the presentation, so you can include them as a chair when you're reaching out. If you get bounce backs or if there's no emails listed, you can reach out to us in the ASHE office and we'll help you out. For the discussants, when you're accessing the papers, the due dates, October 20th for virtual conference day, and for the CEP virtual colloquium, October 23rd, I want to say, for the in-person conference. Y'all can check the presenter guide and make sure, or this presentation, but it's coming up quickly, so you'll be able to find files here. If the authors have not uploaded anything, there won't be anything here, or it might default to an attachment that they had on their original proposal. So if you click into this and you're like, oh, this is like a graph, why am I seeing this? That's because they haven't uploaded the final paper yet. It just defaults to any attachments that they had to their original submission. So this is where you'll be able to find everything you need. To that end, and just kind of on that same vein of discussants, just some notes on accessing the papers. As was mentioned, sometimes folks do not get their papers to you on time. It is in the presenter agreement. Folks have been communicated with to let them know. It's your discretion as a discussant. If they miss the due date, you can elect to provide cursory feedback or no feedback at all. I mean, the reality is if they're late or they've asked for an extension and then missed it, you are not obligated to, scramble and provide anything at the last minute. It's perfectly fine to say, I'm very sorry, the due date was this date. I'm unable to provide feedback. That's perfectly acceptable. So that information has been communicated to presenters. As I mentioned, until the submitter uploads their materials, and as a note, it does have to be uploaded by the person who did the original submission. So as chairs, if you get questions like, I can't submit the paper, I don't have the option, only the author who actually submitted the proposal can upload the final paper. So for groups, that's important to note. It will only show originally submitted proposal attachments there. Discussants of PVDS sessions. We have a separate form for folks who have PVDS materials that they want to share. And so sometimes if someone has a documentary or they have a photo voice presentation, there's a different form that they'll send to our office, and then we'll be able to share with you as a discussant that will have materials that they'd like you to review and provide feedback on. And it invites them to also share notes to kind of let you know what they would like you to focus on specifically with those. If you're a discussant for a PVDS session or a session that includes a PVDS presentation, you can reach out to us with any questions. Accessibility resources are available in the presenter guide. There's a lot of great pieces there that are accessibility consultant, Dr. Autumn Wilkie, has pulled together. So make sure you check out all of that. This was a question that came in the Q&A as well. Some sessions may be missing a chair or a discussant or a paper. So you might see, oh, my session only has 2 papers, 2 presentations, or my session used to have a discussant, but now I don't have one. So our ASHE staff team have been working actively to replace folks who volunteered but had to bow out for a variety of reasons. So we're working to fill in all of the volunteer roles. So if you have concerns right now, you can email us, but we are working on replacing folks. If there's only 2 presentations in your session, the chair should reach out to decide how the group wants to allocate that extra time in the session, because we will have some of those. Okay. We've talked a lot today, but we're going to keep talking next Monday. Specifically for presenters, we have another webinar focused on presenting at the conference, more great nuggets and feedback and just support for folks, especially first-time presenters or folks who've never presented at ASHE before. Everyone is welcome, so feel free to join us for that. But I will stop now so that if we have additional questions with our last few minutes, we can get to anything that's been unanswered. Thank you all so much for your time, for being here. Huge thanks to our panelists and to our wonderful co-chairs. We will hang out for a second and see if there's more questions that come in from the audience. Okay. I'm looking at the Q&A, the chat. I don't think I've missed anything. Okay. Well, y'all should know how to find us if you need any help. You can email conference@ashe.ws. Let us know how we can support you moving forward. Thank you so much for volunteering for ASHE. ASHE wouldn't happen without volunteer leaders like y'all serving as discussants and chairs. You are the community, and we really appreciate your service. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank
We'll
you.
see you soon.
Everyone, yeah.
Hopefully in Denver. Yes.
See you in November.